Speaking of foundation builders that make things possible, it is truly my pleasure to welcome Becky Rom and Ingrid Lyons to this podium. We all know Becky as the national chair of the campaign to save the Boundary Waters and the consummate advocacy enthusiast and mentor to young advocates, and we're so glad that she is here to give us updates, and we are so pleased to have Ingrid joining her. So Ingrid has been with the campaign since 2015 and has basically worn every single hat within the campaign, and she is the executive director. So please let's welcome them to the podium.
Well, welcome. It's great to see so many friends here, and a lot of really long-time Boundary Water defenders. And I think about Chuck Dayton and Steve Paragas and Bill Rom and a lot of others who've really been defending the Boundary Waters for 50 years, 60 years, and all of the rest who have joined the ranks and are part of the effort. Ingrid and I are going to share this presentation today. Ingrid's going to start off, and she's also the closer. So I'm the middle part. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ingrid to kick off. We have a lot of information. We're going to go fast, and hopefully by going fast, we'll have time for a rich discussion at the end. So Ingrid.
Thank you, Becky. Hey, everybody. It's really great to be in front of this crowd. I think a lot of you may have known me originally as the Northeastern Regional Organizer. So I was Maddie's position from 2015 to 2017, based in Duluth and then based in Ely with Levi. And so it feels like a nice reunion to have all of your lovely smiling faces here today. So thank you so much for coming. Real quick before I get started, I do want to just give a shout out to some of our staff and interns who are in the room. So on staff, we have Megan and Lacey and Maddie. And then we have 3 interns. We've got Mac, we've got Ruby, and our 3rd intern, Andrew, who is not present right here, but he's out in the field doing good, hard work. So big thanks to our amazing team. You all know this better than pretty much anyone in the world, but what we at Save the Boundary Waters do is we work to permanently protect the 4.3 million acre Quetico Superior ecosystem, which is inclusive, obviously, of the Superior National Forest, the Boundary Waters, Quetico Park, and Voyageurs. And what we're protecting it from is toxic sulfide or copper mining. And that has always been our goal and remains our goal. It's permanent protection of this watershed and these areas from sulfide or copper mining. The campaign to save the Boundary Waters was started almost exactly 10 years ago by Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. So we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary in September, which is really exciting how fast a decade whizzes by. And we are really a coalition of over 400 groups, 350 or so of which are businesses, both Main Street businesses like Paragas, like Jason Zaborski, and also big national businesses like Patagonia, REI. Patagonia actually gave us a grant this year for $350,000 because they so deeply believe in the work that we are doing. And we have proven to them that we're doing it in a way that will see success. So some really fabulous partners. Our coalition also includes some really critical sort of constituency groups. So we have Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters, which represents hunters and anglers of all gender identities, despite their name. Kids for the Boundary Waters, wherein we train the next generation of wilderness advocates how to advocate for public lands in Washington, D.C. And then the Boundary Waters Business Coalition, which again is that group of over 350 businesses that are saying, you know, either my business directly relies on this and it's going to mean the end of mine, or part of their sort of method and model is we have to protect public lands. Public lands are sacred. And so a lot of outdoor industry businesses among others. So NMW we lead the campaign, and we are the largest Minnesota conservation group advocating for the preservation of this ecosystem. And you all have been here all along. It's again really great to see you all, and some of you may remember this. I see a few of you in the audience who are here. Yeah. So this was our launch of Paddle to DC, where Dave and Amy Freeman paddled canoes all the way to Washington, DC, and this is the launch party. So I see a lot of familiar faces. And really what made this movement in the beginning and still sustains us is the local support. You all have been there through thick and thin, you know, whether it's a launch party, whether it's greeting folks in Washington, DC, and then advocating, using your voice as local folks and business owners to tell Congress, to tell the administration that, you know, the Boundary Waters needs to be protected. You've been there all along. Many of you are probably remember fondly the year in the wilderness, that was 2015 to 2016. And every 2 weeks, local folks just like you went out and resupplied Dave and Amy Freeman, you know, gave them what they needed to, you know, bring the dogs out when it wasn't winter time anymore and, you know, get their summer rations or their winter. And so your support has really sustained us in a big way. There have been other locals who have also really helped with this effort. Lisa Pugh is now on our staff. She's our water quality monitoring manager. But she and 2 other staffers from Voyager Outward Bound School did a Southern Minnesota bike tour. And funny enough, they came to Carleton College in the spring of 2015, which is when I graduated. And that was the first time I had ever heard about Save the Boundary Waters, even though I have a cabin off of the Echo Trail on Big Lake. And I signed that canoe and I can still find my signature there. And that's what connected me to this issue. So when we talk about adventure advocacy and when we talk about mobilizing people and spreading the word, it has significant impact, not just on me, obviously, but the many people who love this place or love the idea of this place, love this community, and who are inspired to take action. And your support also enables us to become national, to become a nationally recognized movement, and a movement where we prioritize educating the next generation, like I said, on how to advocate for wild places, how to advocate for the Boundary Waters and Quetico's superior ecosystem. So this is Kids for the Boundary Waters, which is our program. They do an approximately annual Washington, DC trip, unless Congress is so dysfunctional, it's just not worth it. But they do an amazing job. And so many of you likely know Joseph Goldstein, who was a young man who founded Kids for the Boundary Waters when he was diagnosed with leukemia, and Make-A-Wish came to him and said, "What do you want your wish to be?" And he said, "I want to save the Boundary Waters." And they said, "We don't really do that, but maybe we could figure something out. Are you sure you don't want a pool?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm good." Fortunately, he fully recovered from his cancer diagnosis and treatment. And he still comes to Washington, DC with us today, but he's about to graduate college, which is another odd passage of time. And in this meeting, they're actually meeting with the Department of Agriculture Undersecretary. So that's the office that manages the Forest Service. So they get some really big meetings. They get meetings that some of us boring adults can't get, and they're really quite awe-inspiring. And so just to root us a little bit in geography, again, many of you know this and know this very well, but here we are with the headwaters of the Rainy River headwaters in this area, and the blue lines indicate the water flow. And that's a critical thing. So many people say, how is this mine going to be a problem? All water flows south. All water everywhere flows south. And we say, no, that's not true. So this is the flowage, and this red is the Twin Metals proposed mine area. And so as you can see, that flowage creates quite a problem through the heart of the Boundary Waters into the Quetico, all the way up to Voyageurs National Park. And there was some geological mapping done to sort of indicate the core path of pollution, as we've called it. So this would be, were acid mine drainage to be introduced waters just upstream of the Boundary Waters, where would that pollution go? And we found that it would go, you know, up this chain into Basswood, up into Quetico, and like I said, all the way up over yonder and beyond. So we thought that was a big old problem, and we've been working on it for a decade. And again, our goal is the permanent ban. So we did have a recent win with that 20-year mineral withdrawal. Thanks so much to those of you who showed up, whether that was thanking Secretary Holland or if you came to any of our events. But we are not done. We believe that this area needs permanent protection, because until it does, unfortunately, it remains one of the most contentious wilderness areas in America, and it will continue to be threatened. And I think I speak for all of us when I say, can we just move on? can we do something else? So we have a 5-part strategy, and I will let Becky take it from here.
Thanks, Ingrid. So how do we achieve our goal? And we have a 5-part strategy that we designed 10 or 11 years ago. There were 2 expired federal mineral leases in the headwaters of the boundary waters when we started. Our goal was to convince the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management that they needed to consider the environmental impact of mining in this place. And if they did, they would deny the renewal of those leases. Goal number 2 was a 20-year administrative mining ban. Ingrid touched on that. 3 was federal legislation to permanently protect the watershed. 4th, at the state level, was to convince the state of Minnesota that their non-ferrous mining rules were inadequate to protect the boundary waters, and they should ban copper nickel mining in the Rainy River headwaters. And then last, a state bill to accomplish the same thing. So this is where we are. The federal mineral leases have been canceled. They've actually been canceled twice. Renewal was denied in 2016 when the Forest Service withheld its consent, which is required as a matter of law. Unfortunately, they were reinstated and renewed in 2019 during the Trump administration. The Biden administration took a good hard look at the renewal of those leases and determined that they were unlawfully renewed. Renewal violated NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act rules. The leases and the renewal violated BLM regulations. And last and most important, the renewal was done without the consent of the Forest Service, which is required as a matter of law. So they're canceled. And then on January 26th, Secretary Deb Haaland signed a public land order that imposed a 20-year mining ban on 225,504 acres of superior lands and minerals in the headwaters. So let me just play it out, the drumbeat of what happened. In October 2021, the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management at the federal level announced that the Forest Service had applied for a 20-year mining ban. That immediately started an environmental review of the proposed ban. It immediately halted all mining activity in the area that was covered in the application. And importantly, on that day, the BLM notified Twin Metals and Encampment that all of its pending applications for new federal mining leases, for new federal prospecting permits, and for extensions of existing prospecting permits were denied. And then shortly after that, on December 8th, the BLM notified Twin Metals that its mine plan that it had submitted to the BLM during the Trump administration was denied. In 2022, what happened? First, the Forest Service confirmed in writing that it had never consented to the renewal of the Twin Metals leases in 2019 by the Trump administration. Second, the number 2 person in the solicitor's office, now that's the office of the lawyers who support the Department of the Interior, issued her written opinion finding that the lease renewal during the Trump administration was unlawful. And then on January 26th, the Deputy Secretary of the Interior notified Twin Metals that its 2 existing federal mineral leases were denied, were canceled. And then one more formal rejection of the Twin Metals mine plan by the BLM took place in late February of 2022. So that's how it played out. I'm going to show you what this means on a map. We're all map people because we're paddlers. This map, let's see if I can figure out where this little, okay. This green is the boundary waters. This is the South Kooshwee River that flows out of the boundary waters and meets Birch Lake. This is Birch Lake. At this juncture, the current turns and flows north into White Iron and then back into the boundary waters at Fall Lake. This was federal mineral lease number 1. Look at it, touched the boundary waters by the Gabbro Bald Eagle area. This kind of tan color here and there was federal lease number 2. Twin Metals had proposed mining Spruce Road deposit, which is a very shallow deposit, probably an open pit mine. This is the Maturi deposit, a deep deposit, probably an underground mine. Maturi Southwest, which is a shallow deposit that would be mined to the surface. And the Birch Lake deposit, which is underneath Birch Lake. So that's what this looked like in October of 2021. This purple was an application for a third federal mineral lease. And this is what happened. So you can see no federal lease around the Spruce Road deposit. No federal lease in the Maturi deposit, and no pending application for a third mineral lease, and no federal lease here. So it makes a profound difference. The yellow and the green are state leases and private leases. So on October 21, the environmental review process started for the Forest Service's application for a 20-year mining ban. They start the process with what they call scoping. People of America, tell us what you think the issues are that the Forest Service and the BLM should study in its environmental review. There were about 270,000 comments submitted by the American people. We know that at least 250,000 of those comments supported a 20-year mining ban. There were virtual meetings. Now remember, we're in the pandemic, so we couldn't have in-person meetings. And in those virtual meetings where people are picked by random to speak, it was more than 2-to-1 in favor of a 20-year mining ban. And so then last June, in 2022, the Forest Service came out with a draft environmental assessment. And we talked here at Tuesday Group shortly after that happened. And there was a comment period after the draft came out. The final assessment, and actually Ingrid, could you hold up the accordion folder, please? The final assessment came out in January. I want you to just see it. Turn it sideways so you can see. That's the environmental assessment of a 20-year mining ban. Lots of information, lots of studies, lots of reports. It recommended to the Secretary of the Interior, who has the legal authority, that she order a 20-year mining ban. And she did that. So on January 26th, Secretary Deb Haaland signed a public land order setting aside 225,504 acres of federal lands and minerals in the headwaters of the boundary waters from mining. That is the most significant conservation measure protecting the boundary waters in 45 years, since the passage of the 1978 Boundary Waters Wilderness Act. And this is what it looks like. So here's the boundary waters. Here's the South Coolidge River flowing out of the wilderness, hitting Birch Lake, then turning and flowing north. Everything that's gold is withdrawn from mining for 20 years, including all this land up here on Burnside. So all of that is protected. That represents all of the land in the Rainy River headwaters, where the federal government owns both the surface interest and the mineral interest. So Secretary Haaland went as far as she could go in protecting this landscape from sulfide or copper mining. But we have a lawsuit. Twin Metals didn't like all that stuff that I just described. So they brought a lawsuit in federal district court. It's in the DC circuit, Washington, DC. And they sued the Department of Interior and the BLM. And so we intervened. And we are 5 conservation groups and 10 businesses. And hats off to the businesses who are courageous enough to put their name on pleadings in a lawsuit. The lawsuit challenges the cancellation of the federal mineral leases. It challenges the denial of all those applications and challenges the rejection of its mine plan. It does not challenge the 20-year mining ban. We have recently, together with, well, separately, The Department of Justice represents the Interior Department and the BLM. We're represented by 3 pro bono law firms. And both teams, if you will, have filed motions to dismiss the federal lawsuit, mainly because these kinds of claims belong in the Court of Claims. You can't force the federal government to have a contract with you. And if you are alleging breach of contract, which is basically what Twin Metals is doing, then you have a claim for damages and you go to the Court of Claims. Now, Twin Metals never had a mine, so I would say its damages are 0. So good luck with that. But we're optimistic that the court will dismiss this lawsuit. Now, other stuff's happening. There is opposition to what Deb Haaland did in the BLM and Department of Interior by, among other people, our Congressman Pete Stauber. And so in late April, early May, Congressman Stauber introduced a resolution in the House that would void the mineral withdrawal. He also introduced a bill in early May that would order the reinstatement of Twin Metals mineral leases, its applications, force the review of its mine plan, and also nullify the mineral withdrawal. So a bill and a resolution. The ink wasn't dry on the resolution or the bill when a hearing was scheduled in the House of Representatives. And the hearing was before the subcommittee on energy and mineral resources. It's a subcommittee of the Natural Resource Committee. The chair of the subcommittee is Pete Stauber. Now, they are the majority party now in the House, so they get 3 witnesses. The minority party, which is the Democrats, gets 1 witness. I was the 1 witness. Congressman Stauber had Tom Bach, who is now a Twin Metals lobbyist, and 2 other people who are affiliated with organizations that are funded either by Twin Metals or the copper nickel mining industry. It was a very interesting hearing. We're going to play 1 condensed clip, but there are 2 5-minute clips that are worth watching. The minority, so Pete Stauber's counterpart, the top Democrat on the subcommittee, is none other than Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, actually. Every member gets 5 minutes to make a statement and question witnesses. We have her 5-minute clip, which is a lovely 5-minute clip. The other really interesting 5-minute clip of commentary and then questions is by Congressman Jared Huffman. Now, if we were to play those today, that would take up 10 minutes. I'd love to do that, but then we're not going to have much time to chat. So I've asked Lacey to send those 2 5-minute clips out when she sends out her announcement of next week. But I think you'll enjoy them. But what we are going to play, not just yet, Lacey, a 2-minute clip that Megan put together. Now, there was another thing going on May 11th. There was the hearing that morning. And then in the afternoon, there was an event in the Rose Garden with President Biden. And that event was about conservation. And what does President Biden talk about as one of his top topics? But the boundary waters. And so what we're going to show is a video compilation that has a few highlights from the May 11th subcommittee hearing. So you're going to see AOC and Huffman, and you're also going to see President Biden. So with that, Lacey, can you please play this clip? Do I have to do something?
Yeah. Be a registered lobbyist in the state of Minnesota for Twin Metals, Minnesota.
Let me explain to you.
Is it yes or no?
Got a bill called the Superior Forest Restoration Act, which has nothing to do with restoring a forest. It's about restoring mining interests.
Twin Metals Minnesota, it is that company's leases that were canceled by the Biden administration.
And I protected boundary waters, the canoe area, wilderness.
And with the boundary waters, this is a unique ecological area that needs to be protected.
You know, it's the most heavily visited wildlife area in the nation.
It's overwhelming. It's been peer reviewed. It demonstrates that a sulfate or copper mine would pollute the boundary waters. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when.
We're also protecting what I consider to be, I mean this sincerely, the heart and the soul of our nation, our country's natural resources. They literally unite us. That's why our conservation work, in my view, is so important.
When the Forest Service took a look around the world at the operating sulfide or copper mines, they found that 100% of them have pipeline leaks and other accidental releases of acid mine drainage.
The consensus of the scientific community that this would be, would pollute, damage, and destroy the boundary waters.
Nearly 70% of Minnesotans support a permanent ban on sulfide or copper mining.
Thank you, Lacey. So that was a fun day. Although when I got on my plane to fly home that night, they had seated me right next to Pete Stauber, so we flew up together. I sat down, I was on the window, he was in the middle, I was stranded. He said, Becky, this was the only seat that was available on the plane. So we also work at the state level. And what we're working on at the state level is the adoption of state mining rules that would ban sulfide or copper mining in the headwaters of the boundary waters, and legislation that would accomplish the same thing permanently as an act by the legislature. Why did we do that? In 2017, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency did a water quality assessment of the Rainy River headwaters. And what it found, and it attributed this to the fact that it was 99% forested, was that the water quality was exceptional. In fact, they used what has become my favorite word in describing water quality, and that was immaculate. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency recommended that additional protections be provided for the Rainy River headwaters. I should also note that under the Clean Water Act and Minnesota law, no water quality degradation of the boundary waters is allowed, period, none, zero. Based on that, we waited for the Pollution Control Agency's report on its recommendations. And when that came out, it said, well, there is this issue of mining in the headwaters, but we're going to leave that to the DNR. In other words, the Pollution Control Agency took this hot potato of copper nickel mining and it threw it back to the DNR. And so we sued the DNR. So this is our geography. This is the Rainy River headwaters, that blue line. It's a subwatershed. And you'll see that the downstream 50%, the green, is 80% of the boundary waters. We have the Quetico up here, Voyager there. And all of this is the unprotected headwaters of the Superior National Forest, with all of the surface water and groundwater, as far as we know, flowing north into these areas. Let me tell you what the state's been doing. It's been busy. It terminated the review of a Twin Metals mine plan that had been submitted, and it did so in February of 2022. The DNR has also told Twin Metals that Twin Metals had not substantiated its claim that the ore body it sought to develop would not be acid mine, would not generate acid mine drainage. The DNR has also recommended or rejected dry stack tailings technology. Now, those two things are important because if you go onto their website or hear Twin Metals talking around town, they'll say, one, we're not going to generate acid mine drainage, and two, we have this state-of-the-art technology called dry stack tailings. That has actually been rejected by the state of Minnesota. And then most importantly, in the February 15th, 2022 letter that the DNR commissioner sent to Twin Metals, the commissioner advised Twin Metals that the site Twin Metals proposed for its tailings basin was state land. And if the Twin Metals had no entitlement to it, but the use of that state land by Twin Metals would expose the state to potential Superfund liability. So financial and cleanup liability. In other words, you can't use our land. So what does this mean? This is the Twin Metals mine plan that was submitted both to the DNR and the BLM. They were proposing to develop the Maturi deposit in an underground mine with a decline here into the mine. And it went deeper when you went that way. This was the processing facility. And this was its tailings site, basin site. Notice all of this is right on Birch Lake. And this was a utility corridor. And this is the dry stack tailings site. And you can see how close it is to the lake, to Birch Lake, pretty scary. And this is the way it is now. So this is in this, I don't know what color that is. Whatever it is, eggshell, no, light pink, whatever it is. That's the canceled Twin Metals federal mineral lease. This pink, whatever it is, that's the rejected application for a third federal mineral lease. And this is the state rejection of this site for its tailings basin. My favorite, I can't say my favorite because Katie's here. One of my favorite journalists calls this dead mine walking. So this is where we are. We've accomplished 1, we've accomplished 2. We have 3, 4, and 5 yet to go. So unfortunately, folks, we're still in it for a while. Now let's talk about our state lawsuit. So we asked the DNR to change its non-ferrous mining rules to ban sulfide ore copper mining in the headwaters of the boundary waters based on this ecosystem, the ecology, and the science. We said the rules were inadequate to protect the boundary waters because they allowed that type of mining in the headwaters. So we're in Ramsey County District Court. There's a procedural order. It's very complicated. Long story short, a decision was due out on May 31, 2023. There was a 30-day comment period. They got about 8,000 comments. Thank you all for writing comments. Let me just give you a little more quick background. The non-ferrous mining rules do 2 things. There are some places where the non-ferrous mining rules say you can't mine at all. That's the boundary waters. That's Voyageurs National Park. And there's another section of the rules that says you can't disturb the surface. And that area is called the Mineral Management Corridor. So this is the Mineral Management Corridor, everything that's in pink. So that's where the state says you can't disturb the surface. Now, our goal was not to amend the corridor, but to actually ban mining everywhere here. So what did the DNR find? The DNR determined in its order that its rules were inadequate to protect the boundary waters from light and noise. And it proposed new rulemaking to expand the mineral management corridor so that the boundary waters would not be disturbed by light and noise from mining in the Rainy River headwaters. The DNR determined that its rules on water quality were sufficient, primarily because the law doesn't allow pollution of the boundary waters, so don't worry. Kind of an odd thing. It also said there are particular mining practices that really are not compatible with location in the headwaters of the boundary waters, and legislature, we want you to weigh in, basically change the law to ban these practices in the Rainy River headwaters. So they're the storage of waste ore, tailing sites, whether they're wet or dry, heat leaching and smelting. So that's what the DNR decided. We felt the DNR was wrong on water quality. So under this complicated procedural order, NMW, which is the one plaintiff in the case, Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness, filed a request for a contested case hearing on the issue of water quality. And we did that on June 29th. The next day, Twin Metals filed its request for a contested case hearing on the issue of light and noise. So what's going to happen? An administrative law judge, so not like a regular judge in our court system, but an administrative law judge as part of the executive branch of government, is going to hold what is basically a trial. We've asked for 10 days. We have a long list of witnesses. They're all scientists, experts, that kind of thing, to put on our evidence. After the trial, the administrative law judge will issue his or her order. Then the DNR reviews that order and decides whether to accept it or not. And then what happens is we go back to court. Somebody's probably going to be unhappy, either Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness or Twin Metals. And so then we'll fight it out in district court in Ramsey County. Depending on that outcome, if we prevail, then the state will start rulemaking to change its rules to ban mining in the Rainy River headwaters and to address the light noise issue. So that's how it plays out. It's going to take probably a couple of years for this to play out. State bill, we have a great state bill that bans mining in the headwaters and the issuance of mining permits in the headwaters. So the mining permit would cover all lands, whether they're state lands or not. So at this point, I'm going to turn it to Ingrid to be the closer, and then we can take some time to answer any questions you might.
So we just really quickly also wanted to touch on some of the other programs that NMW has. So I know that there's sometimes it can be confusing that Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness leads the campaign to save the boundary waters and that NMW has other programs. So some of the other things we do that you may have noticed or seen, we have a small grant program in which it's our DEIJ grant program, which stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. And we give small grants to organizations that are either taking underserved populations and introducing them to the boundary waters, or perhaps it's a art project that has to do with boundary waters advocacy. It always has to have a tie-in back to this place, whether it's the, anywhere in the sort of Quetico Superior, and it helps us grow the movement in a meaningful way, because if we don't continue to include people and be intentionally inclusive of building this movement for everybody, conservation is going to be more and more difficult. So we're really trying to sort of invest in folks who have not had the chance necessarily to experience the boundary waters. We also do advocacy on a number of other issues related to the Superior National Forest and the boundary waters and other sort of areas within this region. So we work with the Forest Service, talk to them about fire management, among many other issues. You're also all familiar with Boundary Waters Connect. So Boundary Waters Connect is a program of Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. We are so deeply grateful and delighted to have such a gem as Lacey Squire on our team. But so she and her work is under the umbrella of NMW as well. And what this is really about is seeking to sort of try to answer the question of, okay, you talk a lot about what we can't have, but what can we have? What's generative about what you're trying to do? And, you can talk about a sustainable economy and you can talk about tourism, but what we're trying to do with Boundary Waters Connect is really sort of, in some ways, try to heal the divide that has become really apparent in Ely, and also to, think of ways in which we can all work together to make Ely as awesome a place as it can possibly be for everybody. So that's things like developing workforce housing. That's things like, looking into the issue of childcare in town. And so Lacey's really been doing an excellent job in this arena, just sort of trying to be a thought leader and get conversations going about how we can be a sustainable, livable, lovable wilderness edge community and really shine in all of those ways. Like I said, we're training the next generation of wilderness advocates through Kids for the Boundary Waters, many of whom have come from the camps in this area or have perhaps returned to Ely to live and work and play. And then finally, we do extensive water quality monitoring on lakes and rivers as it pertains to this mining issue, which plays into a number of our other strategies and really supports our ability to say, hey, you know, this water is this precious and this immaculate, or this water is already damaged for these things. We can't be adding additional things to this. So we have a robust research program as well. So I just wanted to run through some of those other things that we do. And then finally, I'd like to make a pitch for our annual garden party. Every year we have a garden party at the Kawishwe Pavilion. This year it is Sunday, August 6th from 3 to 5 p.m. We have a pay what you like option. So please don't think of this event as having any sort of financial barrier. We really encourage you all to come. We love to engage with the community and have a great time and celebrate this place that we all love so much. So please do come to this. I think I brought some postcards for this event, so you can come and grab one if you'd like. And then finally, we'll have some questions and discussion, but we have a myriad of handouts, as we often do. So if you want further information on anything we talked about, we have those up here, as well as I heard it's very popular to give out stickers at Tuesday group, so I would be remiss to have not brought a very big stack of our popular Loon stickers. So, yeah.
And I was just gonna mention, I did bring multiple copies of 2 commentaries. One is by our Bob Tammon, which was in the Star Tribune. It's great. So 20 copies here, grab one. And then on Friday, the Duluth News Tribune did a fact check on what Congressman Pete Stauber's been saying about the mineral withdrawal relative to what the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters has been saying. And lo and behold, they found that what Congressman Stauber's been saying is false, and what the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters is saying is true. So that was pretty interesting, Duluth News Tribune. So I have copies of that and Bob Tammon's, and we'll leave them by the big fat environmental assessment. And then the coolest stickers ever are Loon stickers, a big stack over here by the environmental assessment.
Okay, so now questions, comments?
Wait, I gotta turn it on.
Back there.
Maybe this isn't so directly towards copper nickel, but I have a question about the efforts with the state rules in the watershed. And would that pertain to quarries? We're taking field trips this week to the historic quarries, and there's existing quarries in the watershed. So is that considered mining or quarrying? If the state was to act against mining in the entire watershed, would that affect the
Yeah.
quarries?
All of this work has exempted gravel pits, quarries, and taconite mining. All of that can still continue. The goal is to ban copper nickel mining.
Got a question up here?
I think you showed that there was, I think you showed that there were different kinds of leases, and then there was one category called private leases. What are those?
Yeah, so they're individuals like you and me who own land plus the mineral interests in the headwaters of the boundary waters, and those private owners have leased the right to mine to some mining companies. That's what the private leases are.
That's where they are. They're all the yellow.
Is that a problem?
Yes. But you'll see that they really are insufficient to allow. You have the clicker?
Yeah.
There's none up here by the Spruce Road deposit. they're really insufficient to make a difference with Maturi deposit. Likewise, here's Maturi Southwest and the private leases are here. And then the Birch Lake deposit, which is troubling, it's under the lake. That's primarily state leases. And that would be a difficult deposit to develop.
Becky, talk about the mining things, which would affect, the permitting rules would affect the private business.
Good point. That's why my husband's here. The legislation that is pending before the Minnesota legislature would bar the issuance of any mining permits for any property. And so if that legislation were to pass, the private leases, the state leases, none of those could be developed.
We had a comment come through the Zoom with just deep, deep gratitude. I think you said thank you like 6 times in all caps.
Thank you.
I would echo that. Thank you for all your work and congratulations on your victories. I think one of those 3 witnesses that you mentioned at the congressional hearing was Joe Baldwin. No, he testified. Okay,
But he was a witness at a field hearing in Minnesota that occurred in late April, early May, but it was a field hearing, not a hearing of the subcommittee. In Washington, it was Dave Chura with Minnesota Power. Which if you listen to the 5-minute clip, you'll see AOC ask him, now, isn't it true that Minnesota Power sells 74% of its power to mines and mills? And then the last was an earth science professor from the University of Minnesota.
well, my Tim Waltons is running for county commissioner in Lake County, so that's an election for you all to pay attention to. My question is, in the DNR lawsuit, the DNR apparently found that certain activities within the watershed are a problem. Tailings piles and things. Why did they just say we're gonna make new rules and ban those as a part of our mining regulation? Why do they want to send it back to the legislature?
Before I answer the question, Chuck, I want everyone in this room to know that MIRA was a result of advocacy by Chuck Dayton in the 70s. And before we brought our lawsuit, every once in a while, Chuck Dayton would call me and say, Becky, why aren't you suing the state under section 10 of MIRA? And it finally got through my thick skull that he had a good idea. So thank you, Chuck. I think that's an excellent question. If you read the order, the DNR is just really waffling on the extent of its authority. It's really waffling on what the policy of the state is. And they say in the order, we can't make policy. That's the legislature. Now, the fact of the matter is that the policy has already been made. The policy was made in the 1964 Wilderness Act and the 1978 Wilderness Act. There shall be no mining in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. It was made by the Clean Water Act. There shall be no degradation of water quality in the Boundary Waters. That's policy. And to implement that policy, the only way the state can guarantee that it doesn't violate, especially the Clean Water Act, is if it bans sulfide or copper mining in the headwaters. The track record is clear. Everyone knows what happens. I think it was just frightened of saying we have a policy, we know what to do. Among other things, we should be able to amend our rules and say you can't do those 4 things in the headwaters. It just blinked, which is unfortunate.
To say the least. Other questions or comments or?
It's a comment.
Oh.
I really appreciate what you've done, Becky, Ingrid, and the entire staff the campaign to save the boundary waters, plus the northeastern Minnesota's the wilderness. And I really think we should all stand up and give you standing ovation. That's what it's-
Yeah, that's, we really appreciate the support, and I, I think it can sound maybe hyperbolic or maybe like just for show, but I really did mean it in the beginning. We would be nowhere without the support of this local community. You have all been really, really critical to making this whole thing happen, whether you were at the table when this was founded, or whether you served on the board or volunteered or donated, or which you've all been involved in one way or another. So really, it means a lot. We owe all of our success to you. So thank you again. All right.
All right, folks, thank you so much for attending another Tuesday. We will see you next week. Next week, we're hearing about quantum human design. And if you want to ask Lacey what's that, then you should definitely come to that Tuesday.